Yo, what's up guys? This is Matt from Upsilon Mining coming back at you with another crypto mining video. Okay, so let's talk today about GPU risers. Now, I'm going to start this whole video by saying I'm really not an expert when it comes to GPU risers. I'm not an expert with crypto mining in general. The whole point of this channel is discovery and learning, and I try to make it as interactive as possible. That's why I say, hey guys, comment below, because there's a lot of people that are way smarter than I am when it comes to this stuff, and like I'm totally open to the comments and suggestions from you guys. Let's make this an interactive experience. I want this channel to be somewhere where we can all come together and help each other out, right? Versus me saying, coming with a video saying that I know it all. So each one of my videos is done from the pure standpoint of my experience and what I'm thinking in my opinion a lot of the times, versus definitive universal science, I guess you could say, even though I might try to use some facts and evidence to back things up that I'm saying. So today's video, let's just talk about GPU risers, which is one of the core components to any GPU mining rig. If you're going to build a traditional mining rig and you aren't using a server style case, in most cases you will be using GPU risers. And if you're really new to the game and you don't know what a GPU riser is, a GPU riser simply extends the PCIe Express slots off of a motherboard up higher using a USB data cable, as well as a little I guess this is a little PCE, well, it says PCE to PCE board, right? So this plugs into your motherboard where your video graphics card would normally go, and then into this little card there's a USB cable, and that's the data signal that will then plug up. Let's open this up. So this will plug up into so this is the GPU riser. It's just a little circuit PCB with power input, a slot for your video card to actually go on, and the USB cable. So this is together is essentially how everything works, and how you're able to link up multiple graphics cards onto a single motherboard. Most motherboards doesn't have the room for you to basically lay down multiple or plug in multiple graphics cards at the same time. So this allows you to plug multiple graphics cards into one motherboard, a standard ATX motherboard, and it'll work. When we're talking server motherboards, like I was talking about earlier with the server cases, you can actually line them up multiple, because there's plenty of room, and those cases those motherboards are elongated, so you can actually space out a whole bunch of GPUs, sometimes up to 8, or I haven't seen 12. There might be 12, but I've seen 8 at least, and I have multiple using 8 as well. I got a video on server cases as well that you can check out. So I'm just looking outside because my dog's outdoors. He's gonna start scratching at the door if I don't let him in. Okay, so basically, this is a required component, and this needs to be usually powered externally, right? Because normally this slot here, the power is delivered to it directly from the motherboard. So when you're using a riser like this, you're gonna have a way to supply power, and these are actually really nice risers that I don't actually have. The ones I use, and let me just show you, I like to save costs where I can, and this is one area that I have been saving costs because it hasn't really bit me yet. I haven't run into any problems, and just to show that I am using these, here's one right here of one of these exact same GPU risers, and this one actually went bad, believe it or not. Now I'm not 100% sure if it went bad because when I replaced this with another one on a specific rig, the problem went away. The card kept crashing, so I don't know if it's this card that's the issue, or maybe with the connection it could have been. So it was an easy fix just to swap this out, but there was no problems with it. Like, as you could tell, there's 4 caps on this bad boy, right? It's the same one as there. I've read on Reddit about stories of these capacitors just blowing up, right? Little capacitors just popping. Sorry, let my dog in. All right, okay, now the dog's back in. Okay, so essentially, I've heard of quality control issues with these, where at the factory so the way a capacitor works is, right, a capacitor acts as a small, almost like a little battery. So So, and it also helps regulate voltage, right? So that's why when you turn, like, you might turn certain electronics off, sometimes a little LED light will remain on, and you're like, "Whoa, why is it still on? There's no battery here. The power's cut off." It's because the capacitor is quick draining and usually pretty quick on discharge, right? So it'll hold a small amount of charge for a small amount of time. It could also be used to help regulate voltage. So the way it works is, from my limited knowledge, I'm not I'm not an electrical engineer, but if you know better, please comment below. But essentially, it acts as a little reservoir. Voltage flows into it through one pole and flows out the other pole, and it's only one direction. If you try forcing direct voltage through it, current through it, in the other way, you can have issues like it blowing up or popping, right? And over time, these capacitors can actually wear down and basically pop and start to bulge at the top. If you ever see one of these capacitors bulging at the top, like if you work in, like I have a lot of experience working with retro computers. Like I love Commodore 64s and those old 8-bit machines and like Ataris and things like that. So sometimes you'll see on those old machines, they've been around for 30 or 40 years, the capacitors will actually start to bulge at the top. It means that it's kind of ready to kind of pop or to start stop functioning. So one of the first things you do on a lot of those old PCBs is we go and replace a lot of those older capacitors with newer capacitors that can handle the issues that might come up with a bulging capacitor or when popping, right? It's kind of a preventative measure. So that's one of the selling points with a lot of these risers. So if you take a look at this riser here, these are sold with 4 different capacitors. So the 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? And then this is basically a 6-pack for $54 Canadian, and to me that's a great deal. I have a whole bunch of these. Literally 90% of my rigs are powered by these guys, and I have no problem with them. Sorry, I gotta let the dog out again. Oh, go out. Oh. All right. And a lot of these will come with things like these little SATA to PCIe 4 power supplies, right? So this will plug into where you would normally plug in like an SSD or a hard drive from your power supply. The other end is basically a 6-pin PCI Express plug, right? So this cable is not recommended to be used because this slot here, right? So your GPU is basically sending a requirement into the motherboard, into the BIOS. And it's saying I require this many watts, right? And then the board will supply that much wattage through the slot. If a card ends up requesting more wattage or current than this wire can actually deliver, what happens is the wire can melt. And I can just show you real quick here why it can melt. And this, okay, here, hold on a second. Hold on, guys. I got a picture here that I'm going to show why wires melt and why it's not good to use those. Okay, so this is an example of different gauge wires. Okay, so the way a wire gauge works, all right, so the thicker the wires, the bigger it is, the lower the gauge. So it's kind of opposite. Like you might think, oh, well, I got a 20 gauge wire, that's better than a 10 gauge wire. It's actually not good, right? So it's actually it depends on the amount of current you run through it, of course. But basically, the thicker the wire is, the more current or draw that it can handle, right? Current is measured in amps, right? So amps times the voltage, right, equals the wattage, equals watts, which is the current. So essentially, a lot of the manufacturers that create GPU risers and power cables, PCI Express power cables, go and use a cheaper type of wire. Or I guess it's like the wires themselves inside them are actually thousands and thousands of small little threads that are kind of intertwined together, right? Kind of like a construction bridge with those big giant metal cables, right? They're actually like gazillions, or thousands and thousands of little threads that are just intertwined together. The more threads they intertwine together, the thicker the cable comes, the lower the gauge, which means it can handle more wattage. Unfortunately, as you go thicker, it's going to require more copper material, or whatever the material the wire is made out of. Therefore, it's going to increase the price or the cost to create those wires. That's also going to increase the cost for creating these things, and they're going to also increase the cost that's usually passed down to the customer. So it's in the interest, I guess, to kind of skirt the line on let's not give too much wire, not too little wire, but just enough that we can remain profitable. And a lot of these cheap companies will use cheaper wires in these adapters here. That also being said, the actual power draw of certain types of connectors usually also is limited, right? So a SATA power connector can supposedly only, and this is right off NiceHash, can provide up to 54 watts. Okay, you try pulling more than that, the wire can start getting really hot and start melting. So once again, back to the size of the wires, the gauging. So the thicker the wire, the lower the gauge. The thinner the wire, the higher the gauge. You start putting too much current through here. It doesn't matter, the voltage doesn't matter. What matters is the current. So like if you try pulling too much through at one point, it will actually cause the wire to get really hot. Okay, and if the wire gets really hot, what happens is, like inside the wire, you can imagine the wire will actually start to melt. Believe it or not, it gets really hot, the wire starts to melt. The wire starts to melt, or it gets hot enough that the outside insulation of the wire, like the plastic part, can start to melt as well. If the plastic starts to melt too much on the outside, the wires can actually come into contact together. Okay, what that can happen is it will actually short out. Okay, and when the wires can short out, it causes sparks. Okay, and that actually sparks can actually like maybe ignite something that's flammable next to it, or it can cause the circuits inside the board itself to actually short out, and components can be damaged, right? So the question of a good GPU riser will come down to the power delivery and the quality of the components that are used to build that GPU riser. So for example, if this GPU riser is built with lower quality components such as capacitors or the connectors, these could be more prone to either breaking. The solder joints could break off. The components, the electrical components on them, circuit components on them can actually start to fail as well, which could lead to other problems. Now, why would you go and buy something like this, 72 bucks for 10 of them actually? Wow, no, that's 10 capacitors. So this looks like, is that a 6-pack? One riser adapter card. How many is here? I think it's 6. Okay, so I don't know, man. This has got to be a 6-pack. There's no way anyone pays 72 bucks for one. Okay, so I'm going to think this is probably 6, right? And this is 6 for $54.99. This is 6 for $72. So it's 20 bucks more. But what are you getting? Okay, so supposedly you're getting 10 capacitors, not just 4, right? But the question is, does redundancy matter in this use case? No, I don't know. Are you guys letting the dog back in? Man, he just keeps wanting to go in and out like all day long. And you guys have dogs that like love to go in and out all the time like that? He has a dog door, but it's a little too chilly out there, so I keep it closed right now. So these are 10 capacitors, and you get these cool, I guess, LED. Let's see what it actually highlights. So solid capacitors, 16 volt max, 270 I think ohms for the measurement. I'm not sure what these are rated at. This is a 1x to 16x USB 3.0. Yeah. This features any graphics card. Sorry guys, that's reading. So this allows Molex power. It looks like Molex, PCI Express, and 2 of them. So that's also a consideration. Like kind of like. I never use this power connector. I don't know if do you guys ever use this kind of power connector on the side? I'm always using the ones at the back. I don't know, just something I just. And there's also this coil thing here. Let's see, what does that do? I'm learning as I'm going along here. Let's see here. So this is a special coil unit which absorbs electromagnetic wave, improving mining efficiency. So it's just helping the signal be cleaner, I'm assuming. And then you get your capacitors here. Also the lock mechanism makes a difference, supposedly. But from a spec standpoint, For example, like I haven't had any problems with these. I bought these and I've saved say $20 a pack at least, say $25 a pack, and I bought like I don't know like 100 of these. So if I bought 100 risers, that's a lot of it adds up, right? And I haven't had any issues with it. And redundancy when it comes to capacitors, I don't know how important that is. If one capacitor blows up, I'm pretty sure the whole thing would be gone. So if one capacitor pops, the whole thing is probably done. So I mean, I don't know. So I didn't quite know if the number of capacitors made a difference. So what I did was I took to Reddit and I read something on Reddit here, and let's see what happened here. So I'm getting one comment here saying, it doesn't matter, caps are for filtering the transient response, but you shouldn't have any power spikes when mining. In steady continued load, it doesn't really matter. Also, so they might be equal in total capacitance. Now, we're getting a 12-volt signal from the power supply, and this power supply will meter or manage the output. So if you have a quality power supply, my guess is that the capacitors themselves, having 10 versus having 4, is it really better? That's really kind of up to you to decide. Is it better to get like an iPhone, or is it better to get just like a like a Pixel or something, right? I mean, it kind of comes down to that. Personally, I've had no problems using these ones, so I could recommend these to people to use. So I don't see any issues with whether or not they're better. I mean, have you guys had a horrible experience with these cheaper Amazon risers, or do you prefer to use something from a name brand company or with more bells and whistles? I know some of the GPU risers look like great products, by the way, but can I recommend them without a sponsorship? I don't know if I would recommend them with or without a sponsorship, because I've had no problems using these ones here. And whenever you're saving money and there's no adverse effects from saving money, is it more of an insurance policy than you're paying more, but like, hey, there's less chance of things going wrong, but I don't know. So this person says this person has seen no complaints about the 4 capacitor boards. How can we even confirm 8 of them are hooked up? What's the price difference, right? Almost the same as average 4 capacitors. Why capacitors are so important? There must be a reason, but miners normally do not know the reasons. Yes, so if anyone knows the reasons, please comment below. Here's an example of one of these capacitors popping on one of these Amazon risers. Now, I'm sure that's a problem, but how often does it happen? I haven't had this happen at all, and I have almost 100 cards, and I've been running for like I've been mining for like maybe 5 months now, and no problems at all. Maybe it takes a year or 2 or 3 years, 4 years, but I've seen stories of people using them for 5 to 6 years, no issues. And the idea is, if this pops, you want this thing to blow up, not the GPU, right? So from my understanding, you'll have multiple lines of defense if there's a power surge, right? First off, your breaker panel in your house and any circuits you have, and then the second would be your power supply. If your power supply gets too much of a voltage and it can't regulate to 12 volts, I'm hoping that will pop before blowing up the rest of your computer. And then this would be like another line of defense that this will pop before hitting the GPU. So like before getting to the GPU, you got 3 to 4 layers of protection. So is it really necessary to pay 2 or 3 times the amount on the GPU when the expectation is that you're going to use a quality power supply? So what I would say is, use a quality power supply before expensive risers. So if you're going to build a rig, don't use cheap risers, but then don't use expensive risers and buy a cheap power supply. That just makes no sense. Think of it in terms of layers, right? Which layer is going to pop, right? The power supply pops first, everything else saved, right? And if it gets through that, the level of importance becomes less and less as you go down, and whether or not it just delivers that basic utility becomes more important. Okay, so another thing here, let's take a look here. So the SATA, the power, I want to go back to the power delivery, for example. So the SATA power, 54 watts, that might be fine for some lower end power GPUs. So like I probably wouldn't have a problem using them on like maybe a 1660 Super, but if you start pushing past 150 to 170 watts or something like that, then definitely out. I don't power anything. Actually, I don't power anything. I take all these power connectors that comes with these, and I basically just put them in a bag and I just collect them. I don't know, just like a trophy of what I don't want to use. But yeah, I don't use those. Molex, I'm not using Molex for anything, but I'm using them for some power fan fan controllers. They deliver up to 132 watts. It says theoretical limit is 187 watts, but this is saying 132, which is there's an asterisk next to it. And PCI 6-pin and 8-pin are 75 and 150 watts respectively. So I mean, I know people like to knock on Molex. I think the biggest problem with Molex is they're hard to push and put in and pull out of the connector because they're just a pain in the ass. But Molex, I think, is fine as well. And generally speaking, these connectors will usually come it'll come paired with a wire gauge, which is appropriate for delivering the power through for that connector. So, which is another reason why if you take a splitter cable and try to split like if you try to split 300 watts through it, a single splitter, you're going to still have a choke point where the splitter comes in and joins to the one wire, if that makes sense. Let me just look that up. So let's get PCI splitter. So if you take up a splitter cable, like here, so we take a splitter cable like this, and you're delivering, let's say, a certain amount here. So that's 8-pin. So let's take a look at that. So 8-pin will allow you 150 watts safely, supposedly. So say you have 150 watts through here, okay, and then you have these two going into the top of like a 3090, and that 3090 is drawing 305 watts. That's not good. That's not a good idea. But if you split this out and run these into the risers, that will be usually better because the power draw from the riser isn't going to be as close as much as the actual top of the card. So you also could consider that. So 300, even though each one might say you have a 300 watt total draw, and each one of these, say, like you could look at these independently and say, okay, well that's a pin, so that'll do 150, and that'll 150. Great, but your chokehold is here. Right, and then whatever's plugged into here can only really deliver 150 watts. So now you're pulling more. Like you won't get a wire that's kind of burning out on these ends, but you might get a wire that burns out on this end because it's still trying to force all the wattage through that choke point. So I don't know, guys. That's just another kind of a side comment about power delivery and PCI Express power delivery. So, I don't know, guys. What do you guys think? For now, I'm going to stick to these guys because they're tried and true, and I've had no real problems with them. I might venture out and try some of the other ones, like the more maybe the GPU risers one, or try some of these more 10 capacitor risers. But, I mean, why spend all that money when you could just buy something that does the same thing? I mean, it's like, once again, like, you don't have to look, like, guys, I don't know why I have to keep thinking this and saying this, but maybe I haven't said it before. Okay, anyways, I think this. There's no need to look cool unless you're sponsored when it comes to these things, right? As long as it does the job and within a reliable threshold of safe, where there's a good safety factor, and the chances of them popping and blowing up and damaging your stuff are relatively low, I think these are fine. I mean, I might, like, mark my own words, I might come back in 6 months crying and saying, oh my god, all my risers blew up and my whole farm's dead from the risers popping. But I don't see that happening at all, and I'll report back. I'll make a video on it if I have multiple things fail and I lose GPUs because of it. But if I don't, I'm not going to recommend super expensive risers that you're going to spend a lot more on. Now, let me just say one more thing before I sign off. If you're only building one rig, and you have a budget of so much, yeah, go ahead and get the expensive risers. Why not? I mean, you're only going to get 6 GPUs, spend an extra $30, fine. But now if you have a whole farm and you have 100 or more GPUs, spending that $30-40 for every 6 GPU, like you're talking, like, could add up to thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just for something that looks cooler, that's going to be hiding away in the darkness in some mining room. It doesn't make any logical sense. So, like anything, I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, please comment below and tell me why I'm wrong. And give me your experience. Have you had a GPU riser blow up and fail using a cheap one? Have you bought more expensive ones, and was it more of the shiny new car factor of getting them, or did you feel like you actually needed them? Did it actually make your life as a miner better? Because I don't like these won't like using these ones or any more expensive risers aren't going to increase the hash rate of your cards. Like, I highly doubt that. And if it does, I'd like to see someone come up with some evidence that it does and it makes a difference and actually makes up the amount and the difference that you'd pay for the risers. So anyways, guys, that's all I had to talk about today. Sorry if I rambled on a bit. I'm thinking there were some good pieces of information there. Please comment and like and subscribe and click that notification bell. I love making videos for you guys. I love interacting with you guys, and I love being told that I'm wrong. Because if I'm told that I'm wrong, then I will learn and I will actually improve what I'm doing, and I'll help deliver that knowledge to the rest of the community. Anyways, guys, until later, have a great one. Bye.